Snowdrops are out. River levels have come down a little bit. It's still pretty cold, but we've got a lot to do this year in the garden, and hopefully you've got a better understanding now of kind of where we've got to end up where we are at the moment, if you've watched the time lapse that I put out last time. So this is kind of where we're into year, is this the beginning of year 4 on this project? So we've had kind of 3 years of turning this garden around. But as I say, there's still a whole load to do, because a lot of what we've done to date has been all about stripping out stuff that it was kind of invasive plants, bindweed, a lot of snowberries, although we have left quite a lot of snowberries for the wildlife as well. What else? A huge amount of brambles had to be taken out. And that's the thing, when you end up in a situation where you've got a garden that's been left for a long period of time, invasive plants just take over, and sometimes there is no option but to start again. But today what I'm going to try and do is give you a bit of an overview of what we've got planted where, because the good thing about this time of year, I'm filming this in kind of early February time, and because everything's kind of died back at the minute, you can get a really good idea of what's actually in the beds. Like a lot of these plants over here, in springtime, this will all immediately fill out, and there'll be a lot of these plants that you'll not even see anymore, and that's going to be one of our challenges that we've got, that I'd like to get done sooner rather than later, is that there's a lot of these plants that can be moved around. For example, we've got like a fir tree thing at the back there that's tiny, and it doesn't stand a chance because it's so hidden away by this rose spirea plant here and by the dog rose and everything over this side. We might as well just move that somewhere else. Anyway, we've got a lot of jobs like that to do, but because we're in the middle of winter, you can really get a good idea of what we've got, and hopefully you can help us come up with a few ideas of what we should do, because I really don't have a clue. This channel is all about amateur gardening. I'm kind of learning as I'm going along here, and you guys have already given some amazing advice on what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Probably my biggest failing to date has been planting plants too close together. And by the way, in the time-lapse video, a few people asked, why have we put so much grass down? It is kind of a good question, because I agree there's too much grass, and I'm going to answer that question later on. So I mentioned briefly last time that this garden's basically 10 metres wide and about 50 metres long, just gently sloping down to the river at the bottom there. So it's a pretty big space at around 500 square metres, certainly for any kind of garden near a city centre. Generally speaking, this is the sunny side over on the left hand side of the garden, because basically the sun tracks kind of around that way, so it's always kind of shining in that direction, other than the evening sun, which kind of ends up coming like that way, so you end up with like a sunny area down the bottom here, which is quite nice. But to keep things relatively simple, so you know what's actually going on here, what we've done is kind of split this up into zones. So we've got zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and then zone 5 at the bottom. You can really see what state our poor lawn is in, so this is going to be one of the many tasks that we need to sort out in spring. But anyway, we've got some decking to build just in front of the house where the gravel is at the moment. Zone 1 comes all the way around here. I mean, that on its own is a pretty big bed, all the way up to the hawthorn tree at the side here. Zone 2 is this kind of area here, up to the dog rose and sycamore. The biggest plants on this side that we've managed to keep are the big lilac bush and the rose spirea. Zone 3 continues down the right hand side here. It kind of wraps around where the compost heaps now are, so kind of in that shape-ish. Old apple tree that we kept here, and there's an elder there as well. They're kind of intermingled with each other. Zone 4 is this bed in front of the studio room, down to the raised beds. The back of zone 4 is already quite mature, but we've obviously planted a few extra things at the front here, including a new little plum tree. And then zone 5 basically takes us all the way down to the river, kind of this area here. Most of which is just bare soil at the moment, but in the springtime this will erupt into life, so I'm really looking forward to showing you what's going to happen down here. And then from that, all I've done is I've kind of traced out areas of the garden to map out the different zones. So we've got zone 1, zone 2 down the right hand side, zone 3 which continues over onto page 2 here. So we've got zone 3 down here. I haven't given this little area in front of the studio a dedicated zone because there's only about like 6 plants there or something. We've then got zone 4 in front of the studio, which continues onto this page here, and then zone 5 is basically kind of behind the greenhouse all the way down to the river, and zone 5 is largely going to be left to grow wild. There's loads of extra bulbs, bluebells, daffodils, crocuses, alliums, all sorts of things that we've planted around here. We've got a rhododendron in the corner and another rhododendron over on the front here, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. But basically what this has allowed us to do is to kind of catalogue what plants we've got where, because I've got a terrible memory for plants, and if I don't write it down I will not remember what we've got planted. So I think what we'll do, we'll start off on this region 1 here. There's a few things that I need to fill in yet. You'll get the general idea as we take a bit of a gander at what we've got. So we'll start off from this little corner next to the house here and next to the extension. Obviously we've got pots and things and stuff that need to be replanted up. There's actually a little rose bush in the corner there that gets pretty big in summertime. We've then got this big hawthorn tree that actually needs trimmed back a little bit. It's getting a little bit too close to the house. We do want to keep it because it's a gorgeous tree when it's blooming, but we don't want it getting too out of control. Down around the base of the tree, it's mostly bluebells and lavender, and there's a few other bulbs and things planted in that kind of area there. But that bit of path in front of that bed, that'll probably be coming out, and then we'll just continue a bigger bed going all the way around that. Obviously privet hedge to the back, but the privet kind of blends into a whole load of snowberry bushes later down the hedge, and then it goes back to privet again. So in winter time it ends up looking a little bit bleak, but as soon as spring comes this will just fill up with greenness. Obviously we've got some lavender down the bottom there as well. I can't remember what this is. I'm pretty sure it's an azalea of some description, but I've lost the tag for it. We've then got another lavender, and then we've got our bottle brush plant, another pretty scrawny looking lavender down the bottom there. Oh, and by the way, we've got daffodils are just starting to sprout up all around the garden. We planted those last year. This, I think, is a fuchsia. Now, whether or not that's going to come back, I have no idea. We're going to end up playing the is it dead or not game today, because there's a lot of plants in this garden. I have no idea if they're going to come back. Anyway, we've got then another lavender and another lavender there. And then we get to this slightly problematic area here where I've just simply planted too many plants far too close together. So I'm going to have to move some things around here. We've got a great big Californian lilac here that is already spread out nearly, well, probably about 1.5 meters. It's completely wiped out whatever was planted to the right of it, but again, I'm not entirely sure what that is and whether or not it's going to come back. Again, I think it's a fuchsia. We've got another thing here, I think it might be another fuchsia, but I'm not 100%. And then we've got an acer on the end there. Again, more daffodils that are starting to come through, which is kind of cool. But next to the Californian lilac, we've then got a daisy bush and then a viburnum plant at the back there as well. Is that the Eve Price? I can never remember the name of them. Yep, that's Eve Price at the back. So I think we're going to have to do some jiggery-pokery here, because that seems like such a waste of a plant at the back there that you can't really see at all. So I think we'll need to move that, either just coming around to where these kind of dead spots here are. Really what we need is some bigger background planting along here, but I haven't got a clue what to plant. We've then got our wild cherry trees, 3 of them at the back. They have grown ridiculously quickly. The only problem is that they tend to get attacked by some sort of beetle mite bug thing, and last year we had a bit of a problem where all the leaves started falling off it. So if you've got any good suggestions to stop wild cherry plants being eaten alive by bugs, let us know. But in a nutshell, that pretty much covers off zone 1 at the minute. Obviously we've got the flame azalea at the front there, the pride and joy of the garden. May kind of time, that'll be bright pink, fluorescent pinky orange. The buds have started coming through already, but we've got a good while before this will be flowering. Then over the right hand side into zone 2, and again this looks completely dead, and this had to be heavily cut back before we could kind of bring the good plants back to life and also strip out all of the, as I say, bindweed and nettles and all sorts of things that just shouldn't be there. But give it a couple of months' time, all of this will be filled with green from this lilac tree here that we massively cut that back. It was basically just a stump, and we're now into year 3 after cutting it back, so this should bloom nicely this year, fingers crossed. And we've got the rose spirea bush there. So those are the 2 main kind of focal plants that we've got on this side. We've then got a rose bush down the bottom there. All the way along the fence side we've got clematis planted, and we've got a jasmine here, which hopefully that's not dead. Hopefully that will come back to life. Then in front of it we've got a lavender that doesn't look too clever. I think we've got another fuchsia next to that. Again, I'm hoping that'll come back to life. We've got a kind of cypress thing at the back there, which again, that's just to kind of fill in this area between the rose spirea and the lilac bush over there. So answers on a postcard. I think we're going to be waiting forever for that to grow and fill this space, so we might have to come up with a better idea. We've then got a cordyline that definitely needs moved. It's not happy there at all. It just gets far too much shade. We're on the damp side of the garden over on this side, so that is no use staying there. And once the rose spirea starts growing up anyway, you can't even see it. We've got another plant at the bottom here. Again, I've forgotten the name of that plant there. Has it got a card in it? No such luck. I do normally keep the cards for plants, but I can't find the one for that. We've already talked about the kind of tree thing that's planted at the back there. That definitely needs to get moved because it just ain't doing anything. Again, we've got another, I forgot the name of that one as well. I need to do a bit of research and try and work out what that is. I think following around in front of the dog rose, which I'll talk about in a minute, we've then got a little azalea here with a lavender next to it as well. When we first bought the property, there was a great big sycamore tree growing up here, far too big for where it was. It was shading the garden too much. So we took that out, kind of coppiced it if you like, because we wanted to let that just grow back up, which it is doing nicely. And that is kind of providing a bit of a framework for the dog rose, because the dog rose really needs something to grow up. And we figured, well, if we'll leave the sycamore there and we'll just kind of keep it in check. But that dog rose is already well over 2 meters tall, nearly 3 meters tall, I would say. So we just need to train it a little bit more over towards the fence. We've already started doing that a little bit last year, but now that we've got some of these bigger branches growing, we can get those all tied in to go along that way and then growing along the trellis at the top. And then we're into zone 3. So in this area, again, daffodils coming up everywhere. We've got another cordyline that isn't doing too well at all down the bottom there. Buddleia is doing really well, but then we've got another kind of cypressy tree thing at the back there that isn't looking too clever. Again, I think we'll move that and replace it with something else because it's not doing what I was hoping it would do. It's been in for quite a while now, and I'm looking for something big to fill that space at the back. I want plants that don't get ridiculously tall but grow quite quickly to their final height. A final height that I'm aiming for is maybe 2 to 3 meters, but we just really need stuff along the back here to disguise the fence. We do have clematis planted, but it's going to take a good few years for the clematis to get big enough to start growing left and right and cover the entire fence. And plus, with that not being the sunny side of the garden, the clematis is struggling a little bit anyway. So answers on a postcard as to what would be good to plant along there. So far, the most successful plants have been laurel. I'm tempted to plant more laurel because the laurel's doing really well. I quite like laurel. Anyway, let us know in the comments. Then down at the front here, we have got another, we've got a Californian lilac down the bottom here, and then we've got an apple blossom. The apple blossom's actually doing really well. Maybe apple blossom's the way to go. because it is quite a pretty kind of plant, and that has grown really quickly already. So maybe we should get some more apple blossom to plant along here. I don't know, let us know. This, not sure, might be another viburnum. Doesn't look as well as all the other ones. Then along here we have got a laurel. I've planted a couple of ferns under the apple tree, and I've planted loads of bluebells under the apple tree as well, because just nothing grows under here. We've got another rose, a laurel there, another viburnum, and another random tree that isn't doing very well. That again, I think we'll move that somewhere else. We've got a yew and then more laurel all the way along there. And then we'll get back to our game of, is it dead or not? I have no idea. So in amongst all of this, I think we've got a couple of fuchsia. We've definitely got an acer somewhere. At the end there, we've got a cherry tree, a morel cherry tree. We've got another fern that I've planted at the back there. And then we've got a whole load of dead rosemary. Or I think it's dead. I've never really had problems growing rosemary before, but I don't know if you can see that. If I come around this side, I don't know, has the frost killed that? That was doing really well. All the other rosemary in the garden's done fine, but we've got a whole load of rosemary on this side of the garden that looks like this. And is it dead? I don't know. I guess we'll see if that comes back to life in the springtime. Our little acer's got buds on it, so I think the acer's going to come back to life. I can't remember what this plant is, but it was quite pretty. Whether or not it's alive is anyone's guess. But interestingly, I bought that rosemary, that's a fuchsia, I think, that rosemary and a whole load of lavender. I think I just picked them up from Asda, and all the lavender died, or pretty much died. And is that rosemary okay? Doesn't look okay. You can probably barely even see it. It's so not okay. Again, clematis at the back, clematis there and there and there, but that one looks dead. Did I mention the yew? I can't remember. We've got a rosemary that I planted out around the same time as the other ones, and that's doing absolutely fine. Again, that'll bush out that area. Another kind of azalea thing in front of that. We've then got a couple of pyracantha and then a couple of privet. So the plan is there, with time, hopefully that'll just grow up and disguise the compost heap a little bit. Anyway, that's zone 3 in a nutshell. This is probably one of our most problematic zones because I have literally no idea what's alive and what's dead. Then zone 4 is basically this little bed that leads all the way down to the raised beds and the greenhouse. So I'll very, very quickly give you a tour of this. We've got some heather here. By the way, this water butt needs moved, and I still need to sort out drainage for the studio room. But anyway, well, that's another job for another day. So we've got a heather there. I can't remember what that plant is. It's another one of whatever is over in zone 1 that isn't doing particularly well. Then we've got where this stick pole is thing. I've forgotten the name of it, so I'll come back to that once I remember. We've then got a cotoneaster and a yew. The one yew, we planted quite a lot of bare root yew. Most of it died. It was the only bare root plant that we planted that just doesn't seem to have survived. But whatever reason, we've got one, well, and one over in zone 3. So I'm hoping that kind of fills out this area a little bit, but not too bothered because the cotoneaster on this side and the cotoneaster on that side are both doing really well. We've got a little blueberry plant in front of that, which you can barely see, but that'll fill out. We've then got a plum tree next to that. I think, is that little scrawny thing there another viburnum? I'm not sure. I seem to remember that got absolutely swamped by raspberries, and that's why it's not done too well. And I've taken the raspberries out because they basically weren't doing anything of any benefit. They were producing hardly any fruit. This whole area behind the raised beds was full of raspberries, and it just, no fruit was appearing on them. So I've dug them all out. So we could do with planting up this area here. We've got another rose here and another cotoneaster at the back of this raised bed, which I've kind of vaguely talked about in other videos. But that is kind of zone 4 in a nutshell. Obviously, we've still got the raised beds to plant out with veg and things. We've got the path to build down the bottom here. So don't forget to hit subscribe, because there's going to be loads of projects ongoing, and it would be great for you to kind of see how this garden evolves over time. We've got so much to do. Anyway, answers on a postcard. It does get the sun, that side of the garden. That side's the sunny side, and that side's the non-sunny side, because the sun kind of sets in that corner over there, and it kind of tracks along the sky that way, kind of a little bit higher in the summer, and it rises in the corner like over there-ish. So forever and a day, that will always be the shady side of the garden. There's nigh on nothing we can do about that, other than in the late evening sun. You do get a little bit of sun along that side, and you also get some sun in this corner here where the leftover pile of sand is. So we do want to kind of turn this area into maybe a nice little seating area in the wild section of the garden. So this is zone 5 down the bottom here. You can pretty much see where zone 5 is, because it's just bare soil at the moment. We've got a rhododendron on the right hand side. That's actually doing really well. And as I say, we've planted loads of bulbs and wild flower mix and all sorts of things that we've planted here. So I'm hoping come springtime, this is just going to burst into life down by the river. As I say, we've already got snowdrops coming through. There's plenty of other bulbs are starting to come through as well. What you do tend to get is a lot of cow parsley, and the cow parsley tends to just take over from everything. So I think this year we'll probably be a bit more aggressive about thinning the cow parsley out a bit to give all the other smaller plants a bit of a chance. But we will report back on that. Is that a crocus I can see? Oh look! Is it? Is that a crocus? Yeah, it is, isn't it? Little yellow crocus. And as I say, all of these I think are bluebells about to come through. So we'll see how that looks. But the big thing that we need to consider down the bottom here is what we're going to do about all the shade that we get down here during summer. And we've also got this rogue cherry tree to contend with as well. Basically, I planted this here before I knew that I was going to be building the greenhouse here, and that is going to be far too close to the greenhouse. So it's got to be moved. Generally speaking, I don't like this sycamore, which has kind of self-seeded here anyway. It's pretty big now, but it ends up just being a green fly infested mess during summer. And all it does is shade this entire area of the garden, and it stops anything else from growing down the bottom here because it ends up being so shady. So the plan is to take out this sycamore completely and then plant the cherry tree a little bit closer to the river, kind of around there-ish, and maybe a few other things along the back of the logs and things like that. But the key thing here is trying to make sure that there's enough light getting in, that this wild flower area that we want to exist down the bottom here can actually grow, because if it's too shaded, that ain't gonna happen. Oh, and by the way, there's another rhododendron there that isn't doing too well again, because it's completely shaded by that bloomin' sycamore tree. So lots to do, and I still need to find a home for all this junk here as well. But once we've got the greenhouse properly up and running, there'll be a lot more room in the shed, because at the moment, loads of stuff destined for the greenhouse is in the shed. So once we get my benches built and everything else, we can get all that moved into here, and then hopefully get this pile tidied up a bit. Watch this space. As I say, lots to do. So folks, hopefully you are now up to speed with where we currently are with the garden. And we now kind of need some ideas of where we go next. I do want to grow as many plants as possible from seed in the new greenhouse, because that would kind of be a thing to grow in there. I also need some suggestions as to what to grow in there other than tomatoes and seeds. So answers on a postcard as to good kind of perennial plants that I can maybe start off from scratch, give them some TLC in the greenhouse to get going, and then get them planted out to fill up some of these spaces that we've got in the garden. And as I say, there's still a lot to be done in terms of just removal of grass. Now earlier on I did promise to tell you why we've ended up putting so much grass seed down. Obviously we've seeded this entire area here and we've seeded the area to the right hand side of the studio room. The bottom area already had grass. All we've done to the bottom is cut it. But why did we bother putting so much grass up this end? And it was for one really simple reason. Obviously we've had to dig up absolutely everything here. We had to dig all the old roots out. We had to dig out all the old snowberry plants. There was just invasive species everywhere. Brambles, bindweed, all sorts of things that you can't just leave in a garden because it just takes over from everything else. And actually what you end up with is less diversity in the long run. You just end up with a bunch of quite ugly kind of invasive plants everywhere. So this whole area was just mud. And the reason we've put grass down is just so that we're not walking on mud for the period of time until we get everything properly planted up. And because we're kind of starting from scratch, you know, you do have to wait for plants to grow, and we've already run into problems where we've ended up planting plants too close together and where we maybe need to move a few plants around. So yeah, this is a bit of an evolving process that we've got here, but in the long term we won't be having all of this grass. It's just to keep the mud levels down and to keep things tidy until we work out what else we're doing. We've got a lot of structural elements still to add. We've got a path to add through here somewhere. We've got more beds to add around the right hand side, and as I say, a lot of this stuff's going to be growing in anyway. We don't really want it to look like a great big long skinny garden in the long term. So a lot of this is going to be a patience game of just waiting on everything to kind of grow up, and then we'll get a better idea of what grass we can remove, what extra plants we need to add, and all sorts of other things like that. But hopefully that makes sense. So a massive welcome on board to all the new subscribers to this channel. You have caught us right at the early days of what's going on here. I'm walking backwards and really hoping that I don't fall over. We obviously started off with an overgrown mess. We've stripped it out. We've made a good start on a lot of the structural planting, but we are far from there. And as I say, a lot of this grass needs to come out, and then hopefully at the end of it all we'll end up with something that's a little bit more structured than just kind of one big long skinny strip of grass that we've got at the moment. Anyway, as I say, do hit subscribe if you're new to the channel, and you can follow along with this whole journey from start to finish, see where we end up in a couple of years' time. And you'll also get to see this garden spring into life, pardon the pun, in a couple of months' time, when we can kind of answer the question of is it alive or is it dead, with a lot of the plants, especially down there in our kind of zone 3 thing. Anyway, folks, for now, I think we'll leave it there. As per usual, look after one another, be nice to one another, and we shall see you next time. Tatty bye.